The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 821. You can't die, so why think about death? As Sofia bent to pick up the dagger, a man's mocking voice suddenly rang out. She quickly turned around and saw it was Cedric Bruh. Joshua and Sofia, seeing Cedric, naturally thought about how he had eyed their mother and used a charm on their father, causing anger and deep hatred to surge within them. Cedric saw their expressions but acted as if he hadn't noticed, remaining calm and collected. "Mr. Bruh," old Master Carter and Phillip Wise both called out simultaneously. Cedric's face showed a bland smile, and he nodded slightly as a greeting. "Mr. Bruh, I'm planning to give Sofia and her mother, Macy Wendell, to you," Phillip said first. "Ha ha." Cedric laughed proudly, obviously very pleased. Old Master Carter's face changed several times before he smiled and said, "Mr. Bruh, if you liked them, you could have spoken up earlier. Why wait until now?" Old Master Carter's shameless words shocked everyone. Joshua and Sofia were furious, their eyes almost bulging with rage. Cedric, however, was delighted and excitedly said, "What a day! What makes you all so eager to offer women to me today?" "This is what you deserve, sir," Phillip said first, ingratiatingly. Cedric was pleased with Philip's attitude, nodding his head. "Thank you for recognizing my value." Encouraged, Philip smiled and boasted, "I thought of you, sir, so I made the request." "I've heard, and I truly appreciate Mr. Wise's generosity," Cedric said, looking at Old Master Carter, implying his inadequacy. Old Master Carter managed to stay composed and said, "As an important guest of the Carter family, I believe you have your own choices, Mr. Bruh." "Of course, I have my own choices." Cedric then walked over to the unconscious Robert Wise and lightly tapped him twice. Robert let out a soft groan, then slowly opened his eyes. The next second, his gaze met the people in front of him, and he seemed startled. "Don't worry, Mr. Wise, everything is fine now," Cedric calmly reassured him. Robert noticed his disheveled clothing and hurriedly adjusted it, but his face was preoccupied with the current situation, unaware that his father had taken control. Phillip, seeing Cedric's actions, was very pleased, knowing Cedric had chosen to help him. He quickly bowed and said, "Mr. Bruh, if there's anything you need in the future, just command me and I will satisfy." "Ha ha ha. Good to hear. I trust Mr. Wise," Cedric laughed proudly. Phillip turned to Old Master Carter and said, "You've always wanted to use Mr. Bruh and us. What are your thoughts now?" At this moment, Old Master Carter's face lost its earlier calm, but he still tried to control himself and sighed. "I'm old. I can't manage your young people's affairs anymore. I don't understand them. You decide." "What about the family heir?" Phillip pressed Old Master Carter. "The family heir should of course be Robert now," Old Master Carter decisively agreed to save his own life. Robert, hearing this, felt as if he was dreaming, completely unexpected. Phillip, relieved as if a weight had been lifted, joyfully said, "Then let's deal with Joshua now." Old Master Carter, although annoyed by Phillip's command, still looked at Joshua and said again, "You'd better do it yourself. Don't waste my time." Joshua and Sofia were completely despondent at this moment. This family was not worth clinging to. This grandfather was not really their grandfather. The two exchanged a look, their faces showing resolute determination. "Old Master Carter, you don't deserve to be our grandfather," Sofia shouted angrily first. Old Master Carter acted as if he was deaf, his expression unchanged. "Shameless," Joshua shouted angrily at his grandfather. Old Master Carter remained cold and indifferent. "I hope you can personally kill your own grandson," Phillip said to Old Master Carter, his tone full of mockery. Old Master Carter's expression was very ugly, his face changing colors several times. Eventually, he bent down and picked up the dagger from the ground. Joshua watched the man approaching him looking like a stranger. Old Master Carter said to Joshua, "Your family should have ceased to exist years ago. Living these extra years has been a stroke of luck." "You old fool, we are your grandchildren," Sofia angrily shouted, trying to get her grandfather to come to his senses. However, Old Master Carter seemed not to hear, holding the dagger as he walked towards Joshua. Joshua looked at Old Master Carter. The old man seemed to have taken on a youthful silhouette and stride. His heart chilled, knowing his grandfather was determined to go through with it. Old Master Carter approached Joshua emotionlessly, the dagger in his hand poised to strike at his grandson's heart. It was a ruthless move, his gaze firm and his decision unrepentant. In this moment, Old Master Carter no longer saw Joshua as his grandchild but as an enemy from generations past. Sofia, witnessing this, quickly pulled her brother back, trying to dodge the impending attack. Joshua's heart sank with despair, his face breaking into a sorrowful smile filled with desperation and resignation. Yet he did not move away, He was acutely aware that the place was filled with Phillip's men, any of whom could easily end his life. Being killed by his grandfather, though humiliating and infuriating, felt like the ultimate revenge, as it would leave Old Master Carter with an uneasy conscience. Old Master Carter's face showed no emotion or regret. Killing Joshua seemed as simple as slaughtering a chicken to him. The dagger moved faster, getting closer, its chilling presence almost palpable. In a desperate move, Sofia turned swiftly, ready to shield her brother from the strike. Ding! Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed through the air. Ah! Old Master Carter cried out in surprise as the dagger flew from his hands, flinging into the distance. His body spun around on the spot, staggering before he stabilized. Just then, Kiran York and Yvonne Quinn emerged from their hiding place. Both faces were marked with anger and outrage. The two even felt a dark sense of relief. If they had not returned, they might not have witnessed such a heartless family drama and wouldn't have been able to save Joshua and Sofia. Old Master Carter, seeing Kiran, felt a surge of intense anger and hatred. "Kiran York, what are you doing here?" Sofia burst into loud sobs. Thud! Joshua's body went limp, and he slumped to the ground as if he had been in a dream. Phillip and Robert turned their angry gazes towards Kiran. Cedric's attention, however, remained fixed on Yvonne, his face even breaking into an anticipatory smile. Chapter 822. "Today I learned that the saying, 'even tigers do not eat their young,' is a lie," Kiran York said mockingly as he looked at Old Master Carter. Old Master Carter snorted coldly. "There are no sons of mine here. Joshua and Sofia are your grandchildren, and they represent your son," Kiran retorted mockingly to Old Master Carter's denial. "Kiran York, why are you meddling in the Carter family's affairs?" Old Master Carter angrily questioned. "I'm just trying to prevent you from being senile," Kiran replied, then turned to Phillip and the others and said, "These are the shameless ones, wanting to kill their own family." "That's our family's business, and has nothing to do with you," Old Master Carter responded, his anger and hatred towards Kiran intensifying. "The Carter family's matters indeed had nothing to do with me in the past, but from now on they do," Kiran said calmly and naturally. "On what grounds?" Old Master Carter angrily questioned. "By the principle of seeing injustice on the road and drawing my sword to help," Kiran replied, his gaze sweeping towards Phillip and the others. Phillip's face showed no fear, only contempt. At this moment, Cedric's eyes were shining brightly as he looked at Yvonne Quinn, his expression joyous like a predator who had spotted its prey. Seeing this, Kiran scoffed. "Human greed is fully displayed in all of you." He pointed at the ground where Dehecht and Alice were. "You have no kinship, and even desire has become a transaction. People like you don't deserve to live in this world. Kill him!" As soon as Kiran's words fell, Phillip shouted angrily, giving the order. Hearing Phillip's command, the bodyguards immediately stood straight and charged at Kiran. Kiran didn't expect these bodyguards to be so brave. His lips curved into a smile, ignoring their advance. Whoosh, whoosh. A series of punches broke through the air and headed towards Kiran. "Disperse," Kiran shouted, his body suddenly gathering strength, and a series of thuds echoed through the air. However, after the noise, Kiran was surprised to find that the dozen bodyguards neither retreated nor were injured. This left Kiran slightly taken aback. It was one of the most bizarre things he had encountered. These bodyguards were definitely not skilled masters, not even close to the likes of Faber-Luther and others. Yet the fact that these bodyguards were unharmed puzzled him. "Keep at it. Kill Kiran York," Phillip commanded loudly once more. The bodyguards straightened up again and charged at Kiran. Kiran had already noticed something unusual about their bodies. Their muscles seemed coated with a layer of medicine that appeared almost metallic, significantly enhancing their ability to withstand blows. Kiran looked towards Old Master Carter, whose face also showed confusion, clearly not expecting this situation. Kiran was well aware of how unusual the current situation was. He had encountered the Carter family's bodyguards before in Phoenix City, and they had all fled from him in fear. Kiran speculated that these bodyguards must now be related to Phillip. Bang, bang, bang! Again, the sound of fists colliding filled the air. The sound was loud and heavy, yet the bodyguards remained unscathed, their faces filled with the zeal to kill Kiran. Yvonne stood aside, her face showing curiosity and confusion. Cedric kept his gaze fixed on Yvonne as if watching a beloved prey. Kiran, wanting to understand what made these bodyguards different, did not rush to attack but defended instead. Just then, a fist reached his face. Kiran caught the fist, and just as he was about to exert force, it felt as if his hand had slipped on butter, unable to exert any strength. The fist he had caught slipped easily from his grasp, and the man quickly retreated to dodge. Another person's fist reached Kiran, and he tried to catch it the same way, with the same result. In a blink, Kiran had exchanged blows with all these attackers, feeling the same each time. Kiran was very puzzled and shocked by this situation. Just then, the first attacker came back with another straight punch. This time, Kiran didn't try to catch the punch with his hand. Instead, he had a silver needle in his hand, which he swiftly stabbed into the attacker's fist. Ah! The attacker screamed in pain. Kiran gripped the silver needle and slid it down gently, accompanied by a tearing sound. The bodyguard's hand seemed to split open like a piece of fabric. Kiran was shocked to see that there was no blood, but it seemed like a cloth had been cut open. Kiran quickly moved forward, closed in, and with a thud, knocked the attacker to the ground. The attacker tried to get up, but Kiran stepped on him and then grabbed his arm. The attacker tried to pull away again, as he had done before. Kiran twisted his hand forcefully, and with a crack, he seemed to tear the entire arm off, though it didn't actually separate from the body but appeared to be connected by a piece of fabric. At this moment, Kiran clearly saw that their bodies were wrapped in a protective layer that resembled skin. Kiran was shocked at the presence of such a protective layer. The others were also shocked, but what amazed them was that Kiran had managed to disable a bodyguard. "Attack together. Don't give Kiran a chance," Phillip shouted, reminding everyone. The remaining bodyguards, as if awakened from a dream, surged towards Kiran en masse. This time, their attacks were even more fierce and rapid. Kiran, watching their onslaught, became even more calm and composed. His silver needle continuously punctured their protective layers, rendering them ineffective. As Kiran's needle pierced them time and again, their bodies began to resemble sieves. The bodyguards' screams filled the air, tying everyone's stomachs in knots. Kiran's face, however, showed curiosity, seemingly more interested in their unusual protective gear. Cedric, who had been standing by without intervening, now looked even more upset. His joy at seeing Yvonne Quinn and the admiration he had felt were gone. "Damn, how dare you destroy my feather zen garments," Cedric suddenly bellowed, his body suddenly moving towards Yvonne Quinn to attack. Chapter 823. Facing Cedric Bruh's sudden attack, Yvonne Quinn had no reaction, as if she were frozen in fear. Cedric's face twisted into a sinister grin, seeing Yvonne as an easy prey. Meanwhile, Kiran York, who was entangled with the bodyguards, curved his lips into a slight smile. He was still fighting with the bodyguards and did not move to rescue Yvonne. Seeing Kiran not coming to Yvonne's aid, Cedric's smile grew even more confident and cruel. At this moment, his eyes gleamed with the certainty of victory, even considering the possibility of killing Yvonne. Cedric was getting closer and closer to Yvonne, his hand almost touching her neck. Old Master Carter and others watching this scene were filled with joy. Despite Philip Wise's brutality, Old Master Carter hated Kiran York even more, for it was Kiran who had killed Mills Carter, igniting the current succession dispute within the Jiang family. If forced to choose, he would rather kill Kiran. "Be careful, mistress!" Sofia shouted anxiously, trying to rush to Yvonne's aid. Whoosh! Suddenly, a whooshing sound cut through the air, like the ripping of fabric. Kiran's figure darted out from the encirclement of bodyguards, moving like lightning to Yvonne's side. Cedric, who had been so sure of his victory, suddenly halted, then quickly retreated. Kiran's hand brushed past his clothes, missing him. In critical moments, it's still good to have a reliable husband. Yvonne's face showed no fear. Instead, she wore a blissful smile, blinking at Kiran like a happily married woman. Kiran, however, said nothing but looked towards the retreating Cedric. Cedric's face turned pale, clearly frightened. "Master, could you deal with them a bit faster?" Sofia had run over and grabbed Yvonne's arm, looking at Kiran. Kiran nodded slightly, his gaze fixed on Cedric. Cedric, having recovered from his initial shock, curled his lips into a cold smile. "Kiran York, today is your end." Kiran chuckled. "I don't understand the basis of your statement, because I'm going to kill you today." Cedric, frustrated by the failed sneak attack and Kiran's disdain, was furious. "Then try to kill me," Kiran said calmly, stepping forward. "Don't think I won't dare." As Cedric spoke, he moved like a shooting star to Kiran's side. His hand, which had looked normal before, had turned pitch black as ink, reaching out to grab Kiran. "Watch out for the poison," Yvonne shouted from behind. Kiran remained unfazed, stepping forward and reaching out to grab Cedric's hand. With a thud, their hands clasped together. "Kiran, your love spell won't save you from my poison." "Ha-ha." Cedric laughed heartily, moving forward quickly. He twisted his body to the left, lifting his right leg and delivering a fierce kick to Kiran's abdomen. Kiran grasped his hand, feeling a numbing chill as if his entire body was frozen, seemingly unable to move. Kiran was slightly shaken, but his lips still held a calm smile. Cedric's leg struck fiercely. "Master," Sofia cried out anxiously. Thud! A muffled sound echoed through the air. Cedric's foot hit Kiran's abdomen with force. Kiran stood his ground, unmoving, like a pillar of iron. On the contrary, Cedric was shaken and rapidly retreated several steps before he could stabilize himself. His face filled with astonishment as he looked at Kiran as if seeing a ghost. Kiran's expression was as calm as still water, but his gaze was fiery as he watched Cedric. Cedric, realizing something was amiss, glanced at Old Master Carter and others. "Let's go!" Without waiting for others to react, Cedric was the first to flee. Phillip quickly followed suit. As for Robert and Madeline, no one paid them any attention. "Hey, Cedric Bruh, weren't you going to take Sofia and Macy Wendell?" Kiran called out mockingly to Cedric's retreating figure. Cedric ignored him, focusing only on his escape. Yvonne moved to chase Cedric but was held back by Kiran. Kiran's gaze was now on Madeline and Robert. "What are you going to do?" Madeline shouted defensively at Kiran. "I just want to know how it feels to have a husband like Phillip," Kiran said, his tone mocking. "What's it to you?" Madeline retorted strongly. Kiran didn't reply but turned to Robert. "Cedric helped your company make a lot of money, right?" Robert, unaware of who Kiran was but recognizing the power Kiran had just displayed in frightening Cedric away, replied with a measure of caution. "What do you want to say?" Kiran stated bluntly, "Use the dagger to kill your mother. Kill Mimi." Madeline's face drastically changed, looking at Kiran with a mix of horror and incredulity. "You heard right. I'm telling him to kill you," Kiran affirmed, his tone resolute. "He's my son. Why would he kill me? You idiot!" Madeline lashed out angrily at Kiran. Kiran remained silent, just staring at Robert. Robert's face went through a myriad of changes, clearly wrestling with his thoughts. Old Master Carter's face burned with shame and discomfort, more painful than if he had been slapped. He was acutely aware that Kiran was deliberately provoking him, aiming to disgrace him publicly. "Aren't you going to start now?" "I don't want to waste time," Kiran said calmly, his gaze returning to the dagger. "I'll kill you myself," Madeline snarled, bending down to pick up the dagger from the ground. Kiran made no move to stop her. Madeline's face was flushed with rage as she gripped the dagger tightly and lunged at Kiran, seeming determined to kill him. Kiran watched this unfold, the corners of his mouth curling into a cold smile. "Go ahead," Madeline shouted angrily, but instead of continuing towards Kiran, she suddenly turned and thrust the dagger towards Robert. Robert was completely unprepared. It never crossed his mind that his mother would attack him. The sound of the dagger plunging into flesh was stark. "Ow!" Robert screamed, clutching his abdomen, his face a picture of shock and disbelief. His own mother attacking him. Wasn't it said that even tigers do not eat their young? This must be a mistake. Was she really trying to kill him? Madeline forcefully pulled the dagger out, her face emotionless as if the man before her was not her son but an enemy of many generations. Robert's knees buckled and he slumped to the ground, his eyes wide with disbelief at the harsh reality before him. "This is how a member of the Carter family should be," Kiran commented dryly from the side, then turned to Old Master Carter. "Sophia's father wasn't your biological son, was he?" Chapter 824. "Not your biological son?" Kiran York's words struck like a thunderclap, leaving everyone at the scene visibly shocked. Joshua and Sofia were particularly stunned, as if doused with cold water, rooted to the spot in disbelief. Their father wasn't Old Master Carter's son. They had never considered such a possibility, nor had they ever contemplated such a scenario. Yet Kiran had suddenly brought it up. Could it be true? Thinking of Old Master Carter's ruthlessness toward them, it really didn't seem like they were family. Both siblings began to doubt. Despite their doubts, they still found it hard to believe it was true. They looked at Old Master Carter, their faces filled with questions. "Ah." Old Master Carter couldn't help but sigh, his gaze filled with confusion as he looked at Kiran. "You're smart, using this method to probe." Madeline Carter, holding the blood-stained dagger and looking at her son on the ground, was also perplexed. Joshua and Sofia are inherently kind people, and yet you could conceive killing them. Madeline even being able to stab her own son. "This all shows that you and Madeline are inherently ruthless, completely opposite to Joshua and Sofia's nature," Kiran said, his gaze on Joshua and Sofia, explaining as if to clarify the reason. "Joshua has disguised himself these years, but his inherent kindness cannot be changed, which is completely different from the typical Carter family traits," Kiran continued, his gaze shifting to Old Master Carter with a sneer. "Would any person think of sending their daughter-in-law to another man?" Old Master Carter realized where he had slipped up. He had previously, in a bid to save himself, told Cedric Bruh that if he had proposed to Macy Wendell earlier, he would have agreed without hesitation. Such an action, offering his own daughter-in-law to another man, would be unthinkable for any father. He knew his words had betrayed him. Is it true? Sofia, unable to accept this revelation, shouted hysterically. Joshua pulled his sister back, his face calm, looking at old Master Carter and asking, "If you knew we weren't your biological grandchildren, why didn't you drive us away?" Old Master Carter's face shifted uncomfortably, visibly struggling internally, and remained silent. "For the family's honor, you accepted the reality that your son was not your own, right?" Kiran spoke again. Old Master Carter's face underwent several rapid changes before he looked at Kiran and admitted, "You're too clever. Is it really not true?" Sofia, feeling as if in a dream, looked towards her grandfather, her expression one of desolate confusion. Old Master Carter sighed and finally revealed, "Your father was never a Carter." "How is that possible? He looks so much like my grandmother," Sofia blurted out, her face flushing as she realized the implications. After several facial changes, Old Master Carter said, "Allowing your father to live up to now was already the greatest leniency I could afford." Looking at Kiran, he added, "I regret not having strangled him at birth, and even more so that I didn't let the poison kill him sooner." "So, you've wanted to poison him all along?" Kiran deduced. "Seeing him is my disgrace. Do you think I would let him live?" Old Master Carter did not deny it. "You." Sofia's voice broke, her eyes brimming with tears of furious emotion. Old Master Carter remained very calm and detached, his gaze fixed on Kiran. "If you were a man and your wife bore another man's child, would you accept it?" "Why don't you consider why she bore another man's child?" Kiran countered. "It doesn't matter what is important now, everything is already past," Old Master Carter said, looking down at Robert on the ground without a trace of sympathy. He looked at Madeline and said, "Phillip Wise is a heartless man, and someone like Robert is no good either." Madeline, now calmer, also realized that if she hadn't acted against Robert, he might have done the same to her. Thus she, too, became indifferent and ruthless. Only Robert, pitifully clutching his abdomen and convulsing on the ground, seemed like death could come at any moment. "Was the poison in my father from Cedric Bruh?" Sofia, no longer focusing on her father's true paternity, loudly questioned Old Master Carter. "You should ask Kiran. Can't he solve it?" Old Master Carter seemed too weary to respond. Kiran looked at Old Master Carter and asked, "Where did you bring Cedric Bruh from?" "He was invited from Maui." "Did he come alone?" "Kiran, you seem worried. Are you afraid?" Old Master Carter scoffed. "I'm not afraid. I'm thinking about eliminating them altogether." "Then go ahead and eliminate them all. Once you're done, you'll know the truth," Old Master Carter said, his tone defiant as he looked at Kiran. "Are you going to kill me now?" "If you don't do it now, I'm going to leave." "Do you also want to die now?" Kiran's gaze was cold as he looked at Old Master Carter. "My life is in your hands. I can no longer control my own fate, so do as you please," Old Master Carter said, his voice reflecting a resigned acceptance of his vulnerability. Kiran's gaze then shifted to Madeline. Madeline, clutching the dagger, her face filled with terror, was afraid Kiran would command her to kill her own father. "Madeline, now go and kill Old Master Carter," Kiran suddenly ordered. Madeline's mind buzzed, her entire being plunging into fear. She held the dagger, her expression a mix of nervousness and dread. Unlike her previous action against Robert, where she had vented her hatred towards Phillip on him, knowing Robert might have attacked her first, thus preemptively killing him. The situation with Old Master Carter was different. He was her father, and she couldn't bring herself to harm him. "Now only one of you and Old Master Carter can live. Decide who it will be," Kiran said, his face wearing a cold smile. Old Master Carter's eyes fiercely stared at Kiran. "Aren't you being too cruel? Do you not want to die? Then offer something in exchange for your life. Without a condition, do you think it's possible just to want to live?" Kiran's voice was chillingly indifferent. Old Master Carter's face fluctuated rapidly, his eyes reflecting anxiety and loss. It was clear Kiran wanted more information, and whether Old Master Carter could provide that information would be key to whether he could keep his life. Madeline, still holding the dagger, looked at her father in front of her, uncertain of what to do. "Seize your own chance to survive," Kiran said to Old Master Carter, his demeanor cold as he reminded him. Old Master Carter seemed to fall deep into thought, grappling with his choices. Chapter 825. Several minutes passed, and the scene remained silent. Old Master Carter did not speak. Kiran was clearly growing impatient and turned his gaze toward Madeline. "Go ahead and do it now." Madeline instinctively tightened her grip on the dagger but stepped back. She knew all too well the saying that blood is thicker than water. This was her father, and she couldn't bring herself to harm him. If it hadn't been for Phillip's brutality and Robert's attempt on her life, she wouldn't have been able to act as she did. "Kiran, you've won," Old Master Carter finally spoke, looking at Kiran. Kiran remained silent, waiting for Old Master Carter to explain. This was indeed his goal, to uncover the truth about Randall Carter's origins. "Randall is the illegitimate child of his mother and a man from Maui," Old Master Carter revealed, his face contorting with what seemed like a great shame, veins bulging on his forehead. "An illegitimate child with someone from Maui," both Sofia and Joshua exclaimed, disbelief written all over their faces. "I'm not a born Carter. I married into the Carter family," Old Master Carter suddenly shouted, humiliated. Everyone gasped, taken aback by the revelation. Even Kiran was shocked. Old Master Carter looked up at the sky and slowly continued. "The Carter family had no sons, so after I married in, I changed my surname to Carter, and naturally, any children I had carried the Carter name." This statement exploded like a bombshell, shocking everyone present. "You married into the Carter family? How come no one knows about this?" Kiran was profoundly shocked. "When the Carter family took me in, I was just a child. They treated me as one of their own, and no one knew I wasn't born a Carter," Old Master Carter explained. He paused before continuing. "The Carter family even changed their own daughter's surname, paving the way for me to truly become a Carter." The complexity of the Carter family's maneuvers struck everyone like lightning. "I didn't know any of this growing up, so I always believed I was a Carter," Old Master Carter said, his tone suddenly emotional, with a cold huff, "until Randall was born. The moment I knew he wasn't my son, I understood why." "What do you mean?" Kiran asked. "When Randall was born, I was overjoyed, thinking I finally had a son. But the child's blood type didn't match mine or my wife's. It felt like the sky had fallen," Old Master Carter said, pain apparent on his face. "I stormed in and beat my wife, but instead the Carter family beat me." Old Master Carter paused, his lips twitching as if still engulfed by the past's pain and humiliation. "I couldn't understand it. I was a Carter, and here she was bearing a child that wasn't a Carter's. Why would they beat me? At that time, Randall's mother revealed her true identity and that another man intentionally fathered the child as a way to cuckold me." "Intentionally?" Sofia shouted, clearly shocked. Old Master Carter nodded. "Yes, intentionally. She felt humiliated over the years for not being a Carter while I had become one. So she used this method to take revenge on me and the Carter family." Hearing this explanation, Sofia and the others were helpless, unable to fathom such actions. "Who is Randall's father, really?" Kiran pressed for more details. Old Master Carter shook his head. "Even Randall's mother never told me who he was, not until she died." "Did she take that secret to the grave?" Yvonne asked from the side. Old Master Carter nodded in affirmation. "Why did Cedric Bruh target Randall?" Kiran stared at Old Master Carter, pressing for an answer. "You've already guessed the reason." "Why ask again?" Old Master Carter retorted. "So you were always trying to uncover who Randall's real father was, using him as bait, right?" Kiran confirmed his suspicions. Sofia and Joshua were visibly shocked by the inquiry. Old Master Carter slightly nodded. "That was indeed my intention, but unfortunately I never found out who it was." He then looked directly at Sofia. "If Cedric had expressed his feelings for your mother earlier, I might have given her to him long ago." Sofia, enraged yet powerless, couldn't believe her grandfather would still speak such words. "Your grandmother cuckolded me. Your father shouldn't have lived. I allowed him to live this long, which was already merciful," Old Master Carter continued, his voice filled with unresolved humiliation and anger. Sofia's face contorted with emotion, struggling to hold back. "Did the fish not show up?" Kiran inquired, referring to a mysterious individual or code name in their discussion. "No, the fish never showed up, and that's my biggest regret," Old Master Carter replied, his expression a mix of resentment and frustration. Kiran's demeanor cooled as he processed this information. After a moment of contemplation, he suddenly acted. A silver needle shot from his hand. Robert, lying nearly lifeless on the ground, suddenly felt immense relief wash over his body as if he had been treated. Kiran approached him. Struggling to open his eyes, Robert looked up at Kiran and whispered weakly, "I don't want to die." Kiran pressed several points on Robert's body quickly, then took out a pill and placed it in Robert's mouth. "Now, talk about what you know of Cedric Bruh. Save your own life," Kiran said sternly. Seeing this as his lifeline, Robert nodded eagerly. Meanwhile, Madeline watched in shock and fear. Clearly, she would have preferred Robert to die, to not see and not be troubled further, and to never have to face her own guilt. "Stop dawdling, talk now," Kiran urged coldly. Cedric was in charge of procuring medications for our company. Robert started. "Skip the nonsense. Get to his personal life, Kiran interrupted impatiently. Robert's face turned even paler as he nodded frantically. Cedric requires a woman every day. I had to find a new woman for him daily to satisfy his needs. Beast. Sofia couldn't help but curse aloud from the side. Kiran remained calm and continued to watch Robert, signaling him to continue. And he uses each woman only once. After that, he needs a new one, Robert said, trying to gauge Kiran's reaction. Seeing Kiran's impassive face, he felt compelled to keep talking. The women he's done with, I've heard, end up worse than dead. What happens to them later, I don't really know. You've been satisfying his demands all these years, haven't you? Kiran questioned coldly. Robert felt as if he was gripped by death, his entire body chilled, but he still nodded in admission. Now take me to Cedric Bruh, Kiran said, then reached out, pulled Robert to his feet, and started heading towards the car. Chapter 826. Yvonne quickly got in with Kiran. As for everyone else, they were no longer of any concern. Old Master Carter and Madeline breathed a sigh of relief as if they had narrowly escaped death. Yvonne drove with Kiran and Robert sitting in the back at this moment. Robert was extremely uneasy, constantly stealing glances at Kiran, amazed that his abdominal wound no longer hurt. Kiran remained silent, just sitting quietly. His silence made Robert even more uneasy. Finally, Robert ventured to speak. Cedric has a particular preference. What kind of preference? Yvonne asked first from the side. He seems to prefer married women over young girls, Robert said, quickly glancing at Kiran. Kiran slightly furrowed his brow, apparently surprised by this revelation. Yvonne was also taken aback and asked incredulously, You've been finding him married women? Robert nodded. There are many married women around, especially in nightclubs everywhere. Ha! Yvonne couldn't help but chuckle. That must have saved you a lot of trouble. If you had been looking for young girls all these years, it would have been much harder. Robert's face turned red, but he nodded in agreement. What about the medications he has you prepare? Anything special about them? Kiran changed the subject. I can't specify exactly, but every medication is definitely a bestseller, Robert said, pausing to think before continuing. Like a recently launched cardiovascular drug that became a blockbuster right after its release, already netting me billions in profits. That miraculous? Kiran was somewhat skeptical. Very much so. I happen to have a box in my bag. You can see for yourself, Robert said, opening the briefcase he had been carrying and pulling out a blue box labeled Cardiovascular Relief Tablets. Kiran examined the box, which looked ordinary with nothing special about it. The drug formula also appeared very typical, just a treatment for cardiovascular diseases. He opened the box, took out a pill, and sniffed it. His expression changed immediately. The scent of the medicine was distinctly different from the listed ingredients. He tasted a pill, and soon, a subtle bitter flavor filled his mouth. Kiran smacked his lips, and the medicinal taste intensified. This contains brain zombie goo. Yvonne spoke from the side. Kiran nodded, having already come to that conclusion. The key to the drug's effectiveness was the inclusion of brain zombie goo, which can devour human brains. The brain and blood vessels in these cardiovascular systems are precisely what these brain zombies find most appealing. They naturally consume it, which can restore health to the brain and heart. The amount of brain zombie goo was minimal, so the recovery period was quite long. By the time people regain their health after a year or two, this cardiovascular relief tablet will have already made its sales peak. By then, these people would have new ailments, needing to control the brain zombie goo, thus requiring new medications. This method, akin to the Lachlan family's treatments in Fawkes, essentially involves vampirically draining patients. Kiran's expression darkened, his disdain for these unscrupulous business practices clear. Seeing Kiran's changing expressions, Robert became nervous and quickly said, He's a pharmacist. He said the medication was effective, so I produced it. I don't understand the specifics. You don't need to be afraid. You're not going to die yet, Kiran said coldly, having no good impression of Robert. Now he was eager to see Cedric again. He had intentionally let Cedric go earlier, hoping the man would lead to more truths. Now that the Carter family's issues were largely unraveled, the focus was on Cedric. At that moment, in Cedric's villa, he was packing his belongings. He had knocked out the housekeepers and others, and they were lying unconscious. Cedric was holding a crystal jar containing something black and unidentifiable, treating it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. He carefully placed it in his bag, quickly tidied up a bit more, and swiftly left the villa. Less than 10 minutes after his departure, Kiran and the others arrived at the villa. This is the villa I arranged for Cedric, Robert told Kiran as they got out of the car. Kiran and Yvonne had already stepped out, Robert following. Oddly, after taking Kiran's pill and receiving acupuncture, Robert seemed uninjured. As Kiran and Yvonne approached the villa, they detected a strong scent of goo mixed with a fragrance that ordinary people couldn't distinguish. The two exchanged a glance and quickly made their way inside. Upon opening the villa door, they were confronted with the sight of 5 or 6 women lying haphazardly on the floor, all in their 30s and dressed like housekeepers. "These are the housekeepers I arranged for him," Robert explained quickly upon seeing the unconscious women. Kiran ignored him and headed straight for the open study. The study was a mess, evidently hastily rummaged through recently. "Cedric has probably fled," Yvonne suggested. Kiran nodded. "I wanted to play the long game, but I didn't expect him to be so vigilant and flee. But now one thing is certain. He knows about brain zombie goo," Yvonne remarked. Kiran scanned the room before walking over to one of the women. He lightly touched the woman, causing her to gasp and slowly open her eyes. Upon seeing Kiran, fear washed over her face. "You don't need to be scared, Ms. Walton," Robert quickly said. "Mr. Robert." Sue Walton looked at Robert's bloodied abdomen, her voice filled with alarm. Robert remained composed and asked, "Where did Cedric go?" Sue shook her head. "He just came back and suddenly attacked us, knocking us all out. I don't know where he went." Robert looked at Kiran for guidance. Kiran, however, kept his eyes on Sue. Sue appeared nervous, unsure why Kiran was looking at her. "After Cedric is with a woman, it ends badly for her, right?" Kiran asked. Sue instinctively nodded. "Why aren't you?" Kiran's tone was full of suspicion. Chapter 827. Sue Walton's expression changed instantly, and she instinctively stepped back. A look of surprise crossed Robert Wise's face as he gazed at the woman before him. She was in her 30s, with a delicate face and a voluptuous figure, clearly well-nurtured by men. This woman possessed a maturity and allure that many others lacked, like a flower blossomed through male nourishment, exuding an indescribable charm. What drove men wild was her captivating allure. With a slight movement of her body, she resembled flowing water filled with seduction and allure. When he had first entered and seen her unconscious on the ground, he had been too concerned with finding Cedric Bruh to pay her any attention. Now, seeing her, Robert felt a strong desire. It struck him as odd. Cedric, who favored mature women, seemed uninterested in her. If he were interested in her, constantly changing partners, why then was she still here unharmed? Robert, as an observer, was puzzled. "I don't understand what you mean." Sue surprised everyone by quickly regaining her composure and calmly responding to Kiran's inquiry. "Have you slept with Cedric Bruh?" Kiran stared intently at Sue. "Of course I have. I've been with him many times." Sue responded with ease, her earlier nervousness seemingly fleeting. "Well, if that's the case, how about I sleep with you too?" As Kiran spoke, he walked towards Sue, who instinctively took another step back. However, her gaze quickly fixed on Kiran, and she regained her composure. "All right, let's go to bed now. I treasure this opportunity." Sue appeared surprisingly forward. Yvonne Quinn stood by, completely ignored. Sue openly extended her arms towards Kiran, sparking hope in his heart. This woman was not only skilled in voodoo, but also keenly aware of his current predicament. Knowing that he was under the influence of a love spell and that this might be his only chance was impressive. His disappointment at not finding Cedric Bruh in the villa vanished, placing all his hopes on this woman. Seeing Kiran hesitate, Sue actually embraced him and even took the initiative to hook her arms around his neck. Sue tilted her pretty face up, licked her red lips gently with her red tongue, and looked seductively at Kiran. "Let's go to bed now." Her voice was tender, filled with soft passion and sweet allure. At that moment, not just Kiran, even a block of ice would melt under Sue's charm. Kiran glanced at Yvonne, who furrowed her brow in deep thought. "Aren't you saying we should go to bed?" "Let's go then." This woman used her charm to its fullest, showcasing her beauty to the extreme. Yet Kiran didn't act like a man desperate for physical intimacy. Instead, he calmly said, "Since you're so eager, why don't you come home with me? I'm a nanny arranged here by Director Wise. I can't leave." When Sue heard about leaving, she declined. "You can leave." "I allow it," Robert quickly interjected. Kiran smiled slightly at Sue and said, "Now that you've been allowed to leave with me, let's go. But I'm eager to have a round now." Sue's eyes shimmered like a spring rippling under sunlight full of temptation. Even Robert was taken aback by her gaze. As for Yvonne, her frown deepened even further. Kiran took a decisive step and scooped her up in a princess carry. "Ah." Sue let out a low moan, her voice oozing allure. Kiran carried Sue into the study, and with a thud, he shut the door with his foot. Outside, Robert and Yvonne stood, the former filled with gossip, continuously glancing at Yvonne. Yvonne's frown deepened as if lost in thought. Inside the study, Sue giggled as she began to undress from her nanny uniform. Is this acting fun for you? Kiran's voice was cold as he watched Sue. What acting? Didn't you want to sleep with me? Sue rolled her eyes at Kiran, smiling. Come on, I haven't experienced it. No, I'm eager to experience it. Ha, Kiran chuckled, his gaze landing on Sue's face. You're over 30 and still a virgin. Don't you find that embarrassing? What did you say? The allure on Sue's face disappeared, her eyes becoming sharp. Cedric Bruh is such a lustful man, yet he's uninterested in you. I find that strange, Kiran continued. Sue had already put away her charm and sat on the desk in the study, her arms crossed in front of her, coldly staring at Kiran. I'm also curious, how you can still be alive. Can you help me remove the love spell? Kiran asked. Can you sleep with me? Sue half smiled as she countered. Do you think I'd sleep with you? Kiran responded coldly. Then do you think I can help you remove the love spell? You're in my hands. I can decide your life or death. I'm not afraid to offer my body. Do you think I'd fear death? Sue raised her hand to stroke her hair by her ear lightly, revealing her pale, seductive skin under the light. Ha! Sue laughed lightly. I'm over 30, never been touched by a man. I might as well be dead. Her tone was full of melancholy as she stared at Kiran, as if saying, choose life or death for me. It seemed she was now hoping for Kiran to sleep with her. At that moment, Kiran was a bit headache-ridden. He certainly wouldn't sleep with this woman. Seeing Kiran silent, Sue instead became even more composed and serene, her face breaking into a radiant smile. Does my scent of a woman come off strong? Sue asked, jumping to the floor and daringly reaching up to touch Kiran's chin. Chapter 828. Naturally, Kiran wouldn't let Sue touch his chin. With a slight dodge, he moved away. Sue didn't seem surprised and calmly looked at Kiran. You and that woman have a good love spell. Why do you want to break it? That's my business. You don't need to know, I just want to know if you can remove it, Kiran asked. You should know that everything in this world depends on fate, Sue responded, lifting the hand that had almost touched Kiran's chin. She placed it on her own delicate chin, her beautiful pale jawline enhanced by her elegant fingers in a light gesture that added to her allure. Sue gave Kiran a confident glance. Do you think our meeting here is without divine arrangement? I don't know about divine arrangements, but right now I just want to know if you can remove this love spell, Kiran replied. What would you give me if I said I could remove it? Sue asked, watching him intently. You can keep your life. After you leave, as long as you don't do anything worth dying for, I will not kill you, Kiran promised. And if I sleep with you afterward, would you kill me then? Sue giggled, looking at Kiran. Kiran didn't respond, just stared at Sue. Looking at me so passionately might make me think you have deep feelings for me. Sue acted coyly like a demure woman. Do you really think I can't do anything to you? Kiran was losing patience with her. I'm not afraid of sleeping with someone. What else should I fear? Sue remained cool and composed. Kiran pulled out a silver needle from his clothing, his gaze icy as he looked at Sue. I don't want to waste more time. Just give me an answer quickly. My answer is simple. Sleep with me once and I'll remove the goo poison, Sue stated calmly, looking confident that she had Kiran cornered. Kiran's face darkened. That's impossible. You just said you wanted to sleep with me. Were you deceiving me? Tesk, just a coward at heart, really disappointing, Sue said with disdain. If you're not willing, then I'm sorry. Kiran moved towards Sue with the silver needle, intending to give her a small punishment. Sorry? What's there to be afraid of? Sue suddenly lifted her skirt. Stunned by the sudden display of beauty, Kiran quickly turned away. As soon as Kiran turned, he heard a sharp whistling behind him. He shifted slightly to the left, a whoosh of air passing by his ear. Then a thud as a porcelain bottle smashed against the wall opposite him. You dodge well, Sue's voice followed, and then another whistling sound came. Kiran frowned, dodging again and turning around to see what Sue was up to, only to quickly turn back. He could never have imagined this woman would resort to such underhanded tactics. You'd better put your clothes on or I won't be polite anymore. I don't care about life or death. Is sleeping with someone scarier than death? I'm not scared. Come on! Sue's tone was still teasing, and she continued to throw objects at Kiran. Kiran was infuriated by her actions. Suddenly, he spun around, the silver needle shooting towards Sue. It was fast, but it missed. Kiran was stunned, looking at Sue to see she was holding a white object that was difficult to identify. On closer inspection, it was a living creature, white and unrecognizable even to someone as worldly as Kiran. Keep going, Kiran. You don't just have these few moves, do you? Sue taunted. Kiran's anger flared, and he moved towards Sue. Seeing him approach, she smiled beautifully. Kiran, do I look pretty? His anger boiling over, Kiran raised his hand to strike Sue's shoulder, intending to bring her down. Just as his hand was about to land, Sue threw the white object towards him. With a bang, Kiran's hand collided with the object thrown by Sue. His hand went numb, and he paused momentarily. Sue stood calmly in her spot, and the white object calmly returned to her hand. What startled Kiran the most was that the white object seemed to stretch lazily, moving slightly. "What is that thing?" Kiran couldn't suppress his curiosity and asked. "You don't need to worry about what this is. Just make your choice now," Sue said with a triumphant smile, as if telling Kiran she was out of his reach. "Don't force me to be harsh with you," Kiran said coldly. "Come on, hurry up. I'm looking forward to you being harsh with me." Kiran's anger surged. This woman was going too far. "Really? Hurry up, I can't wait for you to be quick," Sue continued in a seductive tone. This woman completely exasperated Kiran. He was now certain that the goo poison she carried was extremely formidable, otherwise it couldn't have resisted his attacks. The goo poison made Kiran very curious. That Cedric Bruh dared not touch her showed her exceptional abilities. The more this was the case, the more Kiran was filled with anticipation, hoping to remove the love spell. Kiran suddenly stepped forward, grabbing Sue's hands. Chapter 829. Should I cooperate with you, or do you need me to make some noise? Kiran caught Sue Walton's hands, but she wasn't afraid. Instead, she calmly smiled and asked. There was a sharp slap sound, and Kiran's hand landed on Sue's body, leaving 5 finger marks. However, she didn't resist at all. Instead, she cried out. Her voice was loud with a penetrating quality, clearly audible even to Yvonne Quinn and Robert Wise outside. Robert's body shivered slightly. He glanced at Yvonne unconsciously. Yvonne's face remained pensive, seemingly puzzled. Inside the room, Kiran didn't expect such a reaction from Sue after a slap. Annoyed and embarrassed, he asked, "Are you really not going to talk?" "Make me a woman and I'll tell you immediately." Sue's beautiful eyes sparkled with a smile, her long eyelashes fluttering seductively as she gazed at Kiran. Kiran knew this woman was not likely to tell the truth. In frustration, he pushed her away and turned to leave. "Leaving just because you can't handle it?" Sue teased. Kiran ignored her and started to leave. "Kiran, I'll give you 3 chances. This was the first. You have 2 more. If you don't take them, you might never rid yourself of your love spell." Sue picked up her clothes, casually dressing while calmly speaking to Kiran. "There are others." Kiran didn't want to be manipulated by this woman, so he coldly retorted. "I don't know about others, but a dual female love spell isn't something just anyone can break." Sue purposely paused her dressing, her gaze soft and watery as she looked at Kiran. "Even if this goo poison is to be cured, it has to be done simultaneously. Do you think you can manage that?" Giggling, Sue seemed to find it amusing, her laugh full of allure. Kiran's face flushed red, further humiliated. This woman was very straightforward, but that was indeed the reality. This made Kiran even more curious about Sue, as she could speak so freely about the dual female love spell. "Are you just refusing to talk?" Kiran pressed. "I've already stated my condition. Just be good to me." Sue watched Kiran. "You still have 1 chance right now, don't you?" Kiran was furious. Did this woman really have him cornered? However, his hope to cure the love spell also peaked. He knew very well from his many visits to Maui, many were unaware of this situation. "Just keep thinking about it. I hope you can clear your mind someday." After saying this, Kiran turned to leave. "Wait," Sue called out loudly. Kiran stopped and turned to look at Sue. "You're tempted now." Sue, however, shook her head at Kiran with a smile. "I just wanted to tell you, the words you just said, I'm giving them back to you." Kiran. 1-0. Sue extended her fair and delicate finger in the air, her face filled with a playful and happy grin, like a joyful twist. Kiran took a deep breath, controlling his anger, and walked out. Seeing Kiran come out, Robert hastily approached but didn't know what to ask. Yvonne stared at the room behind Kiran. Sue, while dressing, muttered resentfully. That was quick. Robert was surprised and looked back at Kiran, seeking confirmation. Yvonne's face, however, remained calm as water. Seeing no change in Yvonne's expression, Sue seemed slightly disappointed. "Robert, I want to know about the advanced pharmaceuticals." Kiran no longer paid attention to Sue. "You can ask whatever you want," Robert responded respectfully. "What is your Wise's family's relationship with the foreign country? And what is your relationship with advanced pharmaceuticals?" Kiran asked directly. Robert was about to answer when suddenly, bang, a loud noise echoed through the air. Kiran and Yvonne were startled. Kiran saw a hole appear in Robert's body and rushed forward to help, but Robert's body collapsed to the ground with a thud. Robert died just like that. Kiran's eyes were filled with rage. It was completely unexpected that Robert would be killed right under his nose. Turning his head, Kiran saw the white object in Sue's hand that seemed to have just returned to her grasp. "Why did you kill Robert?" Kiran's voice was full of fury, barely contained. Sue's expression was very calm. "Unsatisfied desires. I was in a bad mood." "Don't think I won't kill you." This woman's repeated arrogance angered Kiran. "You want to kill me? Then come on, do it. I'm actually looking forward to being killed." Sue replied, deliberately swaying her slim waist provocatively, her movements fluid like a willow in the breeze. She was using her allure to show Kiran her fearlessness. "Are you a witch from Maui?" Yvonne, who had been silent, focused her gaze on Sue and asked. "A witch?" Kiran was surprised by the term and looked at Sue in disbelief. Sue scoffed at Yvonne's question, laughing coldly. "Maui has degenerated, perfectly reflecting the incompetence of you people. Look at you, the saintess, it's really indescribable." Then, turning to Kiran, she continued, "I'm 33 years old this year. You have 2 more chances. If you don't seize them, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Sue then glanced over Robert's body as if to remind Kiran that if he didn't agree, she could make things very difficult for him. "What is a witch?" Kiran focused on the white object in Sue's hand. "Be good to me and I'll tell you what this is." Sue lightly shook the white object in her hand, her face confident that she had Kiran trapped. Kiran felt helpless and looked towards Yvonne. Yvonne gave a slight nod, indicating she didn't know either. Kiran's expression grew solemn. "I'm leaving now. Remember, you still have 2 chances. If you see me 2 more times and still can't decide, then you'll never know the answer," Sue stated, pausing before continuing. "Remember, the opportunities I give you are rare, and you'll regret missing them." Sue paid no heed to Kiran and Yvonne's reactions and walked away with her long, elegant legs. Kiran wanted to speak, but Sue's voice came again. "Cedric Bruh indeed deserves to die over these years. Let's find a chance to kill him." Her tone almost sounded commanding, which only made Kiran more puzzled about this woman. "Let her go for now." Yvonne stepped forward, holding Kiran back. Chapter 830. What is a witch of goo? After everyone else had left, leaving only Kiran and Yvonne, Kiran was the first to ask. "A witch of goo is merely a legend," Yvonne explained, her beautiful face pensive. "It is said that among the many goo poisons in the Maui region, there are individuals who specialize in bewitching." Goo. She paused thoughtfully before continuing. What exactly these bewitching goo are, no one knows. Nor has anyone ever seen a witch of goo in action. "Is a witch of goo similar to your saintesses?" Kiran inquired, looking intently at Yvonne. "Somewhat," Yvonne replied, glancing towards the doorway as if tracing Sue Walton's departure. "Our saintesses is revered in Maui, and we develop goo poisons. The witches of goo, on the other hand, pursue innovation in goo poisons and generally don't interact with us." "Are they good or bad?" Kiran asked, almost laughing at the simplicity of his question. Yvonne actually laughed. "You can't really say whether a witch of goo is good or bad, just like you can't simply classify someone who is a computer hacker as good or bad." Kiran nodded, smiling. "Have you ever met a witch of goo?" Yvonne nodded. "Yes, I have." "What do they look like? What is their character like?" Kiran eagerly asked. "The woman just now, wasn't she a witch of goo? You saw her, didn't you?" Yvonne's face bore a playful smile as she watched Kiran teasing him. Kiran nearly exploded with frustration at Yvonne's teasing. He glared at her fiercely. Yvonne remained calm, raising an eyebrow at Kiran. "Witches of goo are a legend in Maui. No one has actually seen one. Then how do you know that Sue just now is a witch of goo?" "Did you see her goo poison?" Kiran nodded and replied, "I saw her goo poison, but I don't know what kind it is." "To be honest, I don't know what kind of goo poison it was either," Yvonne said thoughtfully, pausing briefly before continuing. "I suspect that her goo poison isn't something like a goo worm at all." "What is it then?" "Soul," Yvonne said gravely. "Soul?" The image of the white goo poison, seemingly alive yet perhaps not, flashed through Kiran's mind. Notably, this goo poison could resist his attacks. A rare feat. "What do you think it is?" she asked him. "I think it's just a piece of jade," Kiran shared his speculation. Yvonne nodded, affirming Kiran's guess. "I even suspect that the jade is a soul-bearing stone." Kiran's expression turned solemn. He suddenly realized how many secrets the Maui region held, and his own situation seemed to harbor even more secrets. "About the 2 more chances she mentioned earlier, what did she mean?" Yvonne asked, looking at Kiran. "She said I have 2 more chances. If I don't sleep with her, I'll never be able to rid myself of my goo poison," Kiran said, his voice devoid of sentiment and filled with irritation. He was not willing to submit to Sue's threats. Yvonne's expression grew more serious, and she advised earnestly, "You should seriously consider this. What she said could very well be true. That can't be right. Kiran expressed disbelief. If anyone could break the dual female love spell, a witch of goo would be the most likely candidate, Yvonne remarked, causing Kiran to fall into deep thought. It doesn't matter if you don't want to break the goo poison. We can still live well, Yvonne said, looking at Kiran. Kiran fell silent. He knew about the life-death goo that controlled him and Lily and Giannis, preventing a mutual demise, but he was unclear about how things would turn out with Yvonne. More importantly, Kiran wanted to break the goo poison and live a life of his own with Snowzander. But relying on a deal with Sue Walton to break the goo was unacceptable to him. Think about it. Seeing a witch of goo is really rare, Yvonne said, sensing Kiran's hesitation and offering a reminder. Kiran nodded in understanding. Why do you think Cedric Bruh is doing with a witch of goo here? Yvonne replied. I feel he never really had a chance to encounter a witch of goo. Kiran agreed with Yvonne's judgment. Yvonne continued, the witch of goo we just saw, Sue, might be her true form, unlike what Cedric had seen before. This speculation made Kiran's heart tremble, and his eyes lit up. If so, what do you think Sue's purpose is in hiding here? She's waiting for you? Yvonne's expression was somber as she spoke. Kiran's face changed dramatically as he looked back at Yvonne. How could she possibly know about me? Perhaps someone has been monitoring the situation since the dual female love spell was cast on you, even researching how to break it, Yvonne said breathlessly, staring at Kiran earnestly. Don't forget they're called witches of goo, not because their research in goo poisons is different from ours. The dual female love spell you're under is very unusual in the world of goo poisons. Naturally, it would attract their attention. Kiran was lost in thought. Yvonne smiled. No matter what, our situation is very good right now, and Sue doesn't seem to want to harm you. Kiran nodded, agreeing with Yvonne's assessment. And besides, just sleep once. What's the big deal? It's not like it's a little woman's first time, Yvonne laughed after making her point. Kiran rolled his eyes and glared at Yvonne. Let's go. We need to figure out what to do about Cedric. With Sue around, you can rest assured. Cedric isn't going anywhere. Yvonne even chuckled coldly. Cedric meeting a witch of goo is really his misfortune. I feel it's also very unfortunate for me to encounter a witch of goo, Kiran couldn't help but complain. I think it's unfortunate for you to meet any woman, Yvonne laughed teasingly. Kiran glared fiercely and turned to walk outside. Where are we going next? Back to Kiran Mountain. Kiran still had matters to attend to regarding Wendy Kruger.